Bonjour à tous et à toutes, je suis Danny Claude, donc conseiller au partenariat industriel chez IVADO. On poursuit nos présentations sur le thème communauté, culture et justice. Pour ceux et celles qui se joignent à nous pour la première fois aujourd'hui, bienvenue au Zoom sur l'intelligence numérique collaborative d'IVADO. Donc, nos deux prochains conférenciers proviennent du laboratoire de cyberjustice. Ils nous parleront du JusticeBot. Cette présentation sera bilingue, donc je vous rappelle également que vous pouvez nous faire part de vos questions sous l'onglet « Discussion interactive » au bas à droite de votre écran. On va avoir quelques minutes à la fin de la présentation pour poser des questions. Donc, je vous présente nos conférenciers aujourd'hui. Tout d'abord, nous retrouvons Mark Likhten, qui est chargé de stratégie d'innovation juridique au laboratoire de cyberjustice de l'Université de Montréal. Donc, avocat œuvrant depuis plusieurs années dans les domaines des technologies, Mark coordonne divers projets et collabore avec les différents partenaires du laboratoire, tant du domaine privé que du domaine public. Il pilote notamment le projet JusticeBot et assure la collaboration avec le tribunal administratif du logement et l'aide juridique de Montréal et de Laval dans le cadre de ce projet. Our second guest speaker is Hannes Westermann. Is the lead researcher of the JusticeBot project at the Cyberjustice Laboratory and PhD student at Université de Montréal, supervised by Professor Karim Benyeklev. His research combines artificial intelligence and law by using natural language processing and machine learning to increase access to justice. Hannes has presented his research at multiple international conferences and received the Best Paper Award for a research presented at Jurix 2020. Hi, Mark, and hi, Hannes. Welcome, and thank you to be with us this morning.
Hello, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So, my name is Hannes Westermann, and I will today talk about JusticeBot, which is a collaboration between AI researchers, lawyers, and legal institutions. Just want to make sure that my screen is shared. There we go. So, we'll present today first the background of the project, then how the JusticeBot project looks, then how it was built in a cross-domain collaboration between law and artificial intelligence. And then I'll pass the word over to Mark, who will talk about how we're collaborating with stakeholders, which is also a very important part of this project, and briefly wrap up the presentation. So, first, the background of the project. Why is this necessary? Well, the trouble is that laymen have trouble resolving everyday legal issues. And by that I mean issues that are quite high in volume. There's a lot of them, but they are quite low complexity. The legal issues involved aren't that complicated, and the money amounts aren't that high. But these could be issues such as consumer protection, neighborhood, traffic violations, and so on. Despite this, these are quite hard to solve for laymen. One reason being that the law is quite complicated. It's very complex, it's hard to know where to look, which makes it hard for laymen to understand what their rights are. And the second is that courts can be quite expensive. It can take a long time, and hiring a lawyer who knows how to navigate this complex system can cost multiple $100s an hour. And one area where this is the case is the area of the Tribunal Administratif du Logement, which is one of the partners on this project. And they have exclusive jurisdiction in Quebec for dealing with landlord and tenant disputes. And they deal with about 70,000 claims per year. And they also field 1.1 million calls per year of people looking for information. And the average rate of having your dispute resolved is about 7 months. So working with the TAL and also Aide Juridique Montréal, who provides legal aids to people involved in such disputes, we're starting to think about if there is some way of making the situation better. And we came up with a JusticeBot, which is a tool using artificial intelligence to provide legal information to parties in such disputes. So I'm going to briefly show you how this looks. So imagine that we are a landlord and our tenant has stopped paying rent and we're not quite sure what to do. So this is what we'd see on the first page of the JusticeBot. There's information about what it does, explanations of exactly what it does and what it will help us with, and so on. So next, let's click I understand to move on. And here it starts to drill down into our case to understand better what we're looking for help with. So the question is, are you a landlord or a tenant? As you can see here, there's an explanation that explains exactly what this means. So in this case, let's say we are the tenant. And again, it drills further down to understand what exactly is our legal situation. In this case, the tenant does not pay their rent. So next, I'll take us into a more legal analysis. So we'll ask questions that are relevant to determine the legal situation of the party. For example, in this case, is the tenant currently late with paying their rent? You'll see here, again, an explanation with links to relevant legislation and more information, and also some case law. And in a bit, I'll explain why this is useful. Let's say in this case, currently they are not late. So the next question is then, are they frequently late with paying their rent? So based on the answer that we previously gave, the system now selects a different kind of a question to see what our rights are there. Again, here we have an explanation. And you'll see here that this term, often late, isn't really defined. And this is a typical vague term that's not defined in the legislation, but is rather defined in case law. So a judge will look at an individual situation and decide how it should be interpreted on a case-by-case basis. So this is where we provide the user with case law. So by looking at here examples, we can see how this particular criteria was assessed in previous cases. So here we could read, for example, in a case where the tenant paid the rent 5 times late over the past 8 months, the judge saw it as being frequent lateness. So it would be very useful for us to figure out whether this applies in our case. So in this case, let's say yes, there's frequent lateness, and also that we suffered a serious prejudice due to this lateness. Next, we'll get to an analysis page. So the system will now, based on our answers, look for relevant legal information and case law for us. So you'll see here that because we answered that there was a frequent lateness, and also that it causes a serious prejudice, we'll see one of the possible consequences for this legal situation, which is the termination of lease. And once more, we can go to see case law. So these are all cases where the same legal criterion was applied in the same way. The judge also found that there was a frequent lateness, and the outcome tied to this decision. So this has been really helpful in understanding our legal situation in a better way. Of course, we can always go back to see, okay, but what if this is the case? What if another answer was selected? But let's move on now. It will take us to a page of next steps that allows us how to move on, such as getting more advice online, trying to solve this in a friendly manner. And we can also go to the final page, which where we ask for evaluation. How was your experience with JusticeBot? And you can also restart. And as you might have seen on each page, there's also the possibility of evaluating how helpful this page is for you, so that we can continuously collect feedback on how people are using this. So that's the JusticeBot. The idea is really to show the users information to support them in their decision-making, and thereby increasing access to justice. And we're super excited to be able to launch this project in the next few weeks, hopefully. We're in the last stages of revising the content to be able to make it accessible to the public. We think this could have many possible positive impacts. It could increase legal harmony, as people are able to use this tool to better understand their rights and be able to settle their issue with their counterparty, which could increase social peace on a societal level. As the more simple cases, with the aid of this tool, are able to be dealt with on a friendly basis, it could also reduce the court caseload and provide people with an effective means to resolve their disputes, which could increase the rule of law. So that's the JusticeBot. Next, I want to talk to you a bit about how this was created. I think this is quite a unique collaboration between researchers on the legal side and the technical side. So to build the JusticeBot, essentially what we do is that we want to emulate part of how a judge would reason to provide information to the user. So we start with a factual situation. We apply some legal rules to this, and we arrive at a decision on which information to show to the user. So the place to start here is the Code Civil de Québec. This is where the law governing these kind of disputes is covered. And we want to kind of extract the graph of legal criterion that lead to a certain outcome. So as you saw before, question would be whether payment of rent is late, and based on this, another question could be relevant, and eventually legal information regarding to a potential outcome. And often we'll see in the law that we come to this kind of criteria, a good habitable condition, which is vague. So it's not defined anywhere in the law what this means, but rather we go to case law to better understand what this means. And here we're really lucky to be working with the Tribunal Administratif de Logement, which has given us access to 1 million textual documents that we're able to look through to find where this criterion was defined. So for each criterion, we want to identify for each case what the answer was that the judge selected in a certain case and why, and also whether there was a particular outcome tied to that particular criterion. So this we did before in collaboration between the legal side and the technical side, by the legal researchers looking through case law and the law, then passing this content to the technical group, which would develop this and integrate it into the JusticeBot, develop this platform and integrate the content. And this worked really well beginning to validate our concept. But soon a number of shortcomings in this way of collaborating became apparent. First, that the technical was kind of a bottleneck. So all the information passed through here. They had to focus on integrating all this data and the structure in the JusticeBot, as well as developing the platform. Secondly, it's kind of difficult to communicate the structure. As you can see, it can be quite a complex graph structure of criteria. And communicating these effectively is not easy. There's also a lot of formatting involved in how to write the answers. And there's data such as decisions. So before, we didn't really have a structured way of communicating this. And finally, this is very specific research. If you do it this way, you will build a JusticeBot that's very specific to that legal area. But we thought how to solve this, and we decided to create another component, the editor, that kind of alleviates these concerns. So the way it works now is that the lawyers will instead use this editor to encode the content into a structured format. And this structured format contains exactly the information that we will put into the JusticeBot that the user later sees. But because of this direct connection between the legal side and the JusticeBot, the technical side can focus on developing the editor and also the JusticeBot. I want to briefly show you how this looks. So this is the tool that we built, called the Justice Creator. And it allows us to really intuitively and visually update this structure and encode the data. So each block you'll see here is a particular screen that you saw before in JusticeBot. And it's possible to edit this very simply. And what you see is what you get manner here by adding formatting and so on to different parts. We can also change the answers, and we can add cases. And then we see the different possible answers here, and they are collected by arrows to the next block. So by following these arrows, you can see exactly the logical flow of JusticeBot. You can even go into preview mode, where you will see exactly how JusticeBot looks and are able to navigate this to preview exactly how it would work in practice. So this allows us to encode the content in a whole new way, and essentially all the content you saw before in the JusticeBot was created using this tool. So what this does is that it resolves the bottleneck. No longer does the technical team have to stand in the way of integrating new content quickly into the JusticeBot. And here it's structured communication. So all this content exported in a standardized format from this tool can be directly implemented into the JusticeBot, where it'll be accessible to the user. It's also another shift here, because we don't really focus anymore on the specific legal area in creating this tool, but rather we're also thinking about the methodology behind this. The creator that you just saw could be used to encode any potential legal area into such a system. So the focus has really expanded on not just covering this particular area of landlord-tenant disputes, but many, many possible legal areas. And as we collected it in a structured manner, we can also use it for further uses, such as machine learning and also reviewing the content. I want to briefly show you how this machine learning aspects look. So we have now, one of the bottlenecks is that the legal side has to identify cases that are relevant for a particular question. And this is where we integrated the machine learning component into the editor, which provides suggestions on cases that could be relevant to annotate. So this looks like this. If we go to a question here, and we go to the case tab, we will see a list of cases that are suggested by the AI. And this uses deep sentence encoders to be able to surface cases that treat the questions that are relevant to this particular legal criterion, not just based on vocabulary overlap, but really in terms of meaning. And we've seen it be really useful to find cases quickly that we can add to the information in the JusticeBot. And we'll also track whether this is relevant or irrelevant to feed this back into the algorithm to make it even more efficient. So we developed here this kind of interdisciplinary between law and AI end-to-end tool chain to create tools, legal decision support tools using artificial intelligence. It allows each team to focus on their area of competency, the legal side on integrating the relevant legal rules and cases, and the technical side on improving and adjusting the framework, which has enabled us to achieve a huge boost in productivity. It also gives us this holistic focus on the methodology on how to create chatbots like this for any legal area. And it allows us to integrate machine learning methods. So next I'll pass over the word to Mark, who will talk about how we've collaborated with stakeholders inside this project.
Yes, thank you very much, Hannes. I'll switch to French for this portion of our presentation for the benefit of the audience. Donc, peut-être avant d'embarquer sur le sujet de la collaboration qui est au centre de ce projet, rappeler, pour ceux qui nous connaissent peut-être un peu moins, ce qu'est le laboratoire de cyberjustice. Donc, le laboratoire de cyberjustice, c'est un centre de recherche où des chercheurs d'à travers le monde, de différentes disciplines, contribuent à moderniser la justice et les processus judiciaires. Donc, un des constats réalisés durant ces travaux, c'est que plusieurs tribunaux de première instance, des organismes publics, mais également des compagnies d'assurance, des banques, sont confrontés souvent à un problème de volume de dossiers, de demande initiale, si on veut, et cette difficulté, elle ne va qu'en augmentant. Et notamment, donc, comme Hannes l'a souligné tout à l'heure, le tribunal administratif du logement, qui est un partenaire sur ce projet, c'est un des tribunaux les plus achalandés au Canada. Ils ont reçu plus d'1 million d'appels de toutes sortes durant la dernière année. Donc, pour faire face à cette difficulté, nous en sommes venus avec ce concept de JusticeBot et donc développer cet outil. Et dans l'objectif d'augmenter la capacité de ces partenaires de répondre à un haut volume de demandes initiales de basse intensité, si on veut. Donc, comme je l'ai souligné tout à l'heure, la collaboration est au centre de ce projet et peut-être pourquoi je parle d'une collaboration à plusieurs niveaux, parce que elle est un peu différente peut-être de la collaboration plus classique entre fournisseurs-clients. Mais j'ai énuméré ici 4 points de collaboration essentiels, notamment donc il s'agit d'une collaboration multidisciplinaire. Comme je l'ai dit, les chercheurs du laboratoire de cyberjustice provenant de différentes disciplines ont une contribution dans le résultat final. Ensuite, c'est un très bel exemple également de collaboration entre la recherche scientifique, notamment dans le domaine judiciaire, et une application réelle, concrète de ces outils par un organisme public. C'est également une collaboration entre les concepteurs et les milieux preneurs, en l'occurrence le laboratoire de cyberjustice de l'Université de Montréal et nos partenaires sur ce projet particulier, qui sont le tribunal administratif du logement et l'aide juridique de Montréal et Laval. Et finalement, la collaboration de toutes les parties prenantes. Et sur ce point, quand on arrive dans un domaine peut-être qui peut parfois être assez complexe, comme la justice ou le domaine du conflit plus généralement, la quantité de parties prenantes peut augmenter assez rapidement. On peut penser aux avocats, aux parties en question, aux agents, au personnel de nos partenaires, des organismes publics, etc. Donc, cette collaboration à plusieurs niveaux, elle se manifeste à chaque étape de réalisation, si on veut, d'un tel projet, que ce soit à la conception. Hannes a mentionné tout à l'heure, lorsque le tribunal administratif de logement nous a fourni plus d'1 million de décisions, ça nous a fourni évidemment les données et accéléré, contribué grandement à développer plus rapidement cet outil et à pouvoir travailler avec ces données, entraîner les algorithmes, etc. Ensuite, à l'étape du développement, très important, le partage d'expertise, d'expérience, le travail sur le contenu. Ensuite, à la mise en œuvre, lorsqu'on travaille en collaboration avec nos partenaires, à la mise en œuvre, ça nous permet évidemment d'avoir un accès direct à la clientèle visée, aux utilisateurs visés. Évidemment, bon, c'est toujours possible de créer un outil similaire qui serait standalone, permettez-moi l'anglicisme, mais ça ajoute beaucoup de délais pour atteindre la clientèle cible, justement. Mais également, à la mise en œuvre, ça nous permet de valider l'utilité, l'efficacité d'un tel outil, de recevoir un retour d'expérience assez rapidement. Et finalement, l'évolution continue, d'un tel outil qui devrait non seulement s'améliorer, mais également suivre l'évolution législative et jurisprudentielle également. Donc, rapidement, pour conclure, ce que nous voulions vous présenter aujourd'hui, d'abord, donc, un outil innovant dans un domaine qui a tendance à être plus conservateur qu'autre chose. Un outil conçu avec une approche multidisciplinaire, mariant le droit et la technologie. Également conçu en fonction d'une collaboration maximale, donc pour enlever les blocages, comme Hannes l'a démontré très bien, l'interface editor de création donc de ces chemins, de ces parcours guidés, c'est très, très, très efficace, dans le sens où même moi qui n'ai aucune connaissance en code ou en technologie, suis capable de l'utiliser. Également un outil qui est propulsé par des techniques d'intelligence artificielle, le machine learning, on a vu, ça accélère grandement les choses. Et finalement, une collaboration unique entre un centre de recherche, les professionnels de ce centre de recherche, en droit, en technologie si on veut, et les partenaires et les différentes parties prenantes. Donc, nous espérons que vous avez apprécié. N'hésitez pas si vous avez des questions. Et vous pouvez nous contacter à tout moment. On va être content d'y répondre.
Perfect. Merci beaucoup, Mark. Thank you, Hannes, for the thorough presentation. I think JusticeBot is a very nice innovation. Maybe we have the time for one question. So, what is the feedback so far from the legal domain towards digital innovation, such as JusticeBot?
I would say, if I may start, and I'll let you complete, Hannes, if you want. The feedback is very positive, especially with the pandemic. I mean, we've all been propulsed, if we want, in this fast modernization. There are risks and factors to consider, but the legal domain is no exception, and so we have to adapt to the current situation. And tools like the JusticeBot are a very good way to do it.
I think many lawyers have seen this kind of news and have thought, oh, is AI coming for our jobs? So I think we have a bit of work here to explain to them and show them projects like JusticeBot, where we're saying, look here, this isn't really replacing lawyers as such, but what it does is to really expand the access to the legal field to so many more people. And those are people, as we discussed before, that don't really have access to the court system or lawyers in the same way. And using these technologies here, we can really increase that and to cover these people and well and make the legal system much more efficient, hopefully.
Perfect. So we do not have time for more questions at this time, but participants are more than welcome to contact Mark and Hannes through the SwapCard platform. So Mark and Hannes, once again, thank you so much for your time this morning. Nous, de notre côté, on poursuit nos présentations sous le thème de la justice avec ma collègue Gabrielle Langlois qui va prendre la relève dans les prochaines secondes. Merci à tous les participants et participantes.
Thank you very much.